The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everyone, welcome to the Yaron Brook Show. This Thursday night. And for the Yaron Brook Show, a historic night, because this will be the last episode from this room. We are vacating this condo. I've been renting this place for 3.5 years. I've done hundreds, is that right? Dozens of shows from this office, but we are moving into a new condo that we have purchased. Of course, the new condo is still massive renovations are still going on, or small renovations are still going on. But we've got 2 rooms in the condo that have been separated from the rest of the renovations, and we're moving into those 2 rooms, a bedroom and an office. And while the workers work on the rest of the condo to finish it up, who knows when it'll all be done. So this weekend we'll do the first show from my new office, although it'll be a mess. There won't be anything there. We'll have to get by with what we have. Assuming, of course, everything works, right? The internet works, and the electricity works, and everything else. We're in the same. The condo's in the same building as this one. It's 3 floors up, and it's really, really nice, but not right now. Right now, it's a construction zone. So looking forward to moving. So tomorrow, I'm taking all this apart and moving everything upstairs. And next show will be from the new office. All right, today is a Q&A. It's a Q&A with live Q&A with some of my supporters. Of course, it's also a super chat opportunity. So I'll be taking questions from the super chat. We'll be going through some of the people who've joined, some of the contributors who have joined me live, and we will be alternating. You can ask about anything. There's no particular topic. Of course, yesterday I did a Q&A with, was interesting because it was a Q&A with people who were not objectivists on what was Discord. I didn't even know Discord existed, but on Discord. That was a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys got a chance to watch it. It's cool to see what kind of questions people ask who are not part of, the movement, the philosophy, who are not following kind of the basic questions. But it's good. Hopefully we got some of them interested. Some of them will go out and buy an Ayn Rand book, or maybe start following the show. Okay, so let's get rolling. We'll start with Nick.
Can you hear me?
Yep, hear you.
Okay. I wanted. Oh, by the way, I just had a super quick comment on one of the questions I asked yesterday when we were talking about Cheney, and you said she was insignificant in terms of her if she takes a poison pill and runs as an independent. Oh. But she doesn't have to be too significant. I just want to make this point. She doesn't have, with Trump, everything is personal, right? It's very personal. There's John Bolton, you can go down the laundry, there's a laundry list. And what I'm saying is, because it's so personal, all, these elections are decided, as you know, by 5%. Yep. All they have to do is take that poison pill and take away 5 to 10% of the vote, and he'll never get elected. And it's very personal with everyone. So it's going to happen.
We'll see. I mean, it's going to be really, really interesting to watch the Republican Party over the next 3-4 years and see how all this evolves. Who knows? I mean, for all we know, Trump will be in court at that point. He'll be under indictment. I mean, the Attorney General of New York and of the city of New York are serious about trying to go after him. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting.
All right, let's get to the question I wanted to ask. It's on this Reddit crowd with the GameStop phenomenon and the AMC Entertainment Holdings. As you know, this is the second round. They poked the Wall Street bear the second time, and markets. This is over a 6-month period. I understand markets are inefficient in the short term, but in the long term, they're supposed to be more efficient. I mean, you got GameStop going from 107 just this past week, up 40% from 177 to $254 on five times the share count. Same deal with AMC. AMC was $6 for the longest time. It's at 26. We've had 6 months, not 2 weeks, 6 months for, I mean, where is the where is the mechanism to correct this? I mean, everybody knows this thing is grossly overvalued. I mean, aren't the shorts supposed to get organized and come in? I mean, it's supposed to be, they can't do it. I mean, and so I want to ask how long does it take for markets to self-correct, and why don't they self-correct? Why aren't they more efficient? And what are the long-run repercussions, both from an economic and a political point of view? The economic, I'm talking about, the dollars and cents, and the political, I'm talking about, how like the hard left crowd now has an argument. This is a casino. Markets aren't fair, and we've got the proof.
No, absolutely. This is really bad. It's really bad because it's diverging. It's just sending a negative signal about the way markets work, what markets are, the way markets function to the American people. It's distorting prices, and it's really bad. It really is bad. And markets are not efficient when one of two things happen. They're regulated and controlled so that you're limited in what you can do, and when people are irrational. That is, markets efficient assumes rational investors. It assumes the profit motive matters. It assumes people know what they're doing. And what we have today is a large number of people. And if you add enough people up, the sums of money become significant, who are completely irrational, completely ignorant, who don't know what they're doing, and who therefore are moving markets in ways that don't make any sense. And it can last, for a long time. Add to that the fact that it's very difficult to short. It's difficult to short because the risk is asymmetrical. Right? When you buy a stock, the most you can lose is everything you invested. You cannot lose more than you invested. When you short a stock, the most you can make is 100%. There's no limit to how much you can lose. You can lose well over 100% of your initial investment. So short selling to begin with, just because of the asymmetry of risk, is more difficult. In general, I've always said markets are going to tend to be overpriced more often than they're underpriced. It's easy to correct prices upwards. It's hard to correct prices downwards because of the asymmetry in risk associated with short selling. Now, add to that it's not always easy to short. You can only short on, and I don't remember all the rules, so forgive me, but like you can only short on a uptick, not on two consecutive downticks, so all kinds of stuff like that, which makes it difficult. It's very unsexy to short. That is, there is a cultural opposition to shorting, if you will. and sometimes government intervention into shorting. So for example, during 2008 crisis, shorting was banned, which created all kinds of distortions for short sellers. And it's not an easy place to be. So regulations affect that in that they make it shorting harder. Regulations affect it in that they might arbitrarily outlaw the shorts, and then you have to get out of your positions at a loss. But also, on the flip side of that, would Robinhood exist in a purely free market? I don't know. I'm not sure, but I'm a little skeptical. The whole structure of markets today is a consequence of regulation and control, right? The whole idea of high frequency trading is a phenomenon of regulations, because it used to be not that long ago. I still remember these days. If you listed on the NASDAQ, you only traded on the NASDAQ. If you listed in the NYSE, the New York Stock Exchange, you only traded on the NYSE. Daniel remembers these days, right? Wasn't that long ago, right? Daniel was in the financial markets, right? Now, once you list on a particular exchange, you're traded on all exchanges. Now, there's an arbitrage opportunity between the price in the NASDAQ and the price in the NYSE, which I can arbitrage through high frequency trading. That never existed because you could only trade in one place. But that was deemed monopolistic, and that monopoly was gone. And now you have all of this. So the profits that happen today are completely distributed differently, allocated differently. And I'm not sure something like Robinhood would exist in a free market. It is a product of this structure of regulation. If Robinhood doesn't exist and you have to pay, I don't know, $10 a trade or whatever it happens to be, right? Now maybe you don't gang up and do these stupid things because there's a cost. It's not, quote, free, right? Now the cost of what you're doing is actually transparent. So there are massive distortions in the marketplace. And it's very, very hard to show that to people. This is the weakness, right? This is why what's happening is so bad. Because people are going to associate what's happening right now with capitalism. But it's not. It's just not capitalism. Add to that a central government that is printing money and sending us checks. I just got a check in the mail. Hey, why not go to the casino? Why not go buy some GME stock? What the hell? If I lose it, it wasn't my money anyway. And if I make money, cool. I made money off of government money I got from the government. And a lot of this money is stimulus money. It's stimulating GME stock. I mean, I wish I'd been an executive with some stock options. God, they all became gazillionaires. Talk about CEO pay. There's some unjust CEO pay. So I don't know how long it can last, given the irrationality in the market and given the structural deficiencies in the market. In 1998, it lasted over a year, right? It took until March of 2000 for the NASDAQ to correct for what I think was a bubble partially inflated by enthusiasm for tech. And I won't say irrational enthusiasm. Some of it was irrational, but a lot of it was real. But once people get enthusiastic, it somewhat diverges from reality. And by the Fed printing a lot of money, partially because of Y2K and a bunch of other things. And it took about over a year. I bought put options on Amazon in January of '99, a year too early, right? And I rolled them over once. So there were 3-month put options. So I got to June of '99, and Amazon was only going up. So I was wiped out. If I bought them January of 2000, I would have made a lot of money, right? You can't have completely efficient markets when a significant number of people are irrational. And that's just a reality. And now, efficient markets, you know, with regard to a particular stock like GME and AMC, this is really unprecedented. I think that for such a long time, they have managed to maintain this, not as a market phenomena, but just these stocks. That's unusual. And that suggests that the Robinhood phenomena is really distorting markets. This whole idea of zero cost trading is distorting markets. I mean, the fact is that in a rational world, most people wouldn't trade. I mean, most of the people trading wouldn't trade. They'd be too rational to trade. They'd let professionals do it, and most of them would be passive. So it's depressing. And it's very bad. It's very bad for our cause to try to convince people that markets can be efficient, and that over the long run they are. It's very difficult in this kind of environment to show that to people.
Has this ever happened in the last 40 years?
Not that I know of, not on specific stocks. I mean, I gave the example of where
the tech bubble.
I mean, I gave the example, I think last time, where I lost $1 million of a client's money by shorting a stock in 1999 that I thought was expensive. And it was expensive. And then in April of 99, it went from $40 a share to $250 a share in 2 days, just like these stocks go. And it came back down, but it didn't. It took it 2 years to go down to $2 a share, and it took it 4 years to go back down to zero, right? Literally go bankrupt. But by then I was out because I was short. And when it went from 40 to 250, I basically lost 4 times my initial investment. So I lost $1 million on a $250,000 investment. That was not good. That was not good. That was painful, and a real lesson learned as an investor on you don't short things like GameStop when you see these phenomena. It's just too dangerous. You let everything calm down before you get into it. And the latest spike just proves that it hasn't calmed down. And you know, the shorts are sitting on the sideline waiting for this to get some, you know, for some reason to come back into the marketplace. So in that case, it lasted a year or two. And I think it can here as well. And that was 98, 99. That was without Robinhood. And it still survived. That was on Yahoo chat boards. If you remember, there was the ticker on Yahoo Finance. There were the chat boards, and people were writing up stocks on the chat boards. All right. Thanks, Nick. Corey, we got 2 Corys. So we'll start with Corey Clamp.
Hey, Ron, how are you doing this evening?
Good. How about you?
I am doing wonderful.
Good.
I can't remember the question I was supposed to ask. You can pass me now. Sorry about that.
Okay, we'll come back to you.
All right.
Corey Flores.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can. Yep.
Hey, how are you, Ron?
I'm good. I'm good.
I just had a question on the principle of self-ownership. I always looked at it as a legacy of the mind-body dichotomy.
Legacy of the what?
And the mind-body dichotomy.
Yeah. Yep.
Do you think this could be a hindrance in the fight for individualism? Given that some libertarians that seem to accept the premise of the mind-body split. But
broader than that, I think the fact that so many libertarians hold a bad philosophy of one kind or another is a hindrance to success of liberty, because they are viewed as advocates for liberty, but then they hold some, let's say, a Kantian philosophy or religious philosophy or a subjectivist philosophy, and or a form mind-body dichotomy, or they hold altruistic views, and that is a hindrance to taking their economic ideas seriously. And I think we all suffer the consequences of the fact that some of our perceived allies have a rotten philosophy. And at the end of the day, I think we understand that this is a philosophical battle. It's not an economic battle. It's not a political battle. This is a battle about egoism versus altruism, about the mind-body dichotomy, about faith versus reason. And capitalism is just what flows out of the right answers. Right. You don't start with capitalism. So I think the idea of self-ownership is a mind-body thing. You cannot own yourself.
Yeah.
Ownership is something that you do. First, you exist. You have a consciousness.
Exactly.
You have a mind. You create. You own. You can't own you. I mean, it's a tautology. It doesn't make any. It makes no sense. It has no meaning, right? There's not a mind that owns the body or body that owns the mind. I mean, who is you and who is you? So, you are the entity that owns, not, and you can't, in that sense, you can't own yourself. So I understand what they're trying to get at, but of course, what really Rothbard is trying to get away from by using that is trying to get away from the need of morality. He just starts with self-ownership, which he takes, well, of course you own yourself. I mean, who else would own it? And it also places property rights as the fundamental right, instead of really the fundamental right being the right to life, which is a really, really important hierarchy to place life first.
Yeah. Oh, excellent. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks, Corey. Right. Daniel?
First, a couple things. You haven't, as you know, haven't even touched on 1/10% of the market distortions that are created by current regulations. So it's really hard to project. I will say that in a free market, someone like a Robinhood would be allowed to, put it the other way, someone like a Citadel would be allowed to offer money to people to make the trades through them, because there's value to that information. Uninformed traders have, and so maybe they would exist, maybe they would. Who the hell knows?
Who the hell knows, and who knows a Citadel would exist if these market makers would exist? I mean, the entire structure of financial markets today is a pure product of regulation. We don't know what it would look like in you know, if technology was more advanced. If, who knows? But yes, I'm suspicious of the Robinhood, not of the business model, given the existing regulatory structure. It makes sense for Citadel to pay them, but whether this would actually exist.
Understood. The other one is, in April '99, the CFO of Amazon said, "We lost money this quarter and we're going to lose money for the foreseeable future." And I was looking at puts very seriously. I did not get into them, but I was like, come on, a company that the CFO says we're not going to make money for the foreseeable future? Really? Yeah.
Well, do you remember this guy, and now I forget his name, but he became very, very famous. And then after, at some point he was kicked out of finance and became a financial journalist. And I forget his name now, but he was working for an obscure investment bank, and he made the call that Amazon was going to go to 400. It was at 200. It was going to go to 400, something like that. And he was a nobody. And within days, Amazon went from 200 to 400. And I think it was Merrill Lynch immediately hired the guy and made him this star tech analyst. And he was on all the TV shows. He was everywhere. And still to this day, he's a big shot among financial journalists. And he made a completely random call with no justification, because I read the article. And I think that's around the time where I decided this is the time to buy the put. I was way too early.
Yeah, I hear you. My question actually goes to the lawsuit from Epic against Apple. Epic Games, Apple says they violated their service agreement for being on the App Store. Epic says They just wanted to give users a lower cost way of buying add-ons. Megan DeMuzio, Executive Director of the Coalition for App Fairness, which Epic is a part of, says, "We are pleased that the trial shined a light on Apple's anti-competitive App Store practices that limit innovation and hurt consumers. With greater awareness of Apple's conduct, there is growing support around the world for our goal of a fair app marketplace that will benefit all developers and their consumers." Now, none of these people are stupid, right? I mean, if you went to them and said, hey, if you don't like what Apple's doing, why don't you create your own Apple? They know how unbelievably hard that would be to recreate what Apple has done and the value that Apple has created. And so if you push them and said, well, why is it that you're suing Apple? All they could really point to it and say is, well, we think what Apple's doing is illegal under antitrust laws. So what is it going to take to get the public, and eventually the senators, congressmen, et cetera, to say, antitrust doesn't make sense. We're punishing companies for being successful, because if Apple didn't make a very good product, they wouldn't be sued right now. It's because they make a great product that Epic is suing them, and Google at the same time for the same thing, monopoly domination of the market.
But of course, that's how you get large market share and therefore become a quote monopoly.
Oh yeah, Chinese.
Nick, you're not muted. Let me mute you. I muted you. Okay. That's how you get big. You get big by being successful. You get big by creating great products. You get big by convincing customers to buy your product and not the competitors. You get big by dominating, which means being successful, being good at what you do. But they don't care for two reasons. One, an economic reason, one, a non-economic reason. The non-economic reason is it's just not fair. It's just not fair that some people succeed and others don't. It's just not fair that Apple has created such a great product and I have not. It's just not fair that all this is going on. I desire, I feel. That's it. It's emotion. And it's appeal to altruism and appeal to victimhood. And now that they've achieved this, they're crushing the little guy, so no new Apple could rise up, which is complete nonsense. I mean, look at the market cap of Zoom and look at all the companies that have been successful over the last year that have done phenomenally well in spite of Apple and Google, in spite of Google having a competing product, Microsoft having Skype. How did Zoom beat Skype if Microsoft is this mighty big tech company that crushes all opposition? So it's appeal to emotion and morality. But then there's also an economic element to this. Anybody who's taken an Econ 101 class knows this. Monopolies are bad. Monopolies are inefficient. If we break up monopolies and create a perfect market, perfect competition, we get cheaper, better goods. And nobody makes too much money because there's no profit in a perfect competition, so that it's both fair and we're better off. Now, the fact that is, I was going to say voodoo economics, but that gives voodoo doesn't deserve be associated with the stupidity that this theory is. It is completely detached from reality, complete mysticism. No serious economist who's ever looked at the world rather than in mathematical models would take any of this seriously. It's complete nonsense. And yet, this is taken as economics and it's taught. I always say, of all the stuff in the economics textbook, the one chapter I would just rip out and shred is the chapter on perfect competition, because it does so much damage to the average person's understanding of economics. Is that's what they, where does the average person, to the extent they go to college, get an understanding of economics? From Economics 101, right? And that's what's taught. So what's it going to take? God.
I think part of that answer is it's got to be rational argumentation, which means supporting the Yaron Brook show more.
It's 1,000 Yaron book shows. It's 1,000 Yaron book shows. It's intellectuals in every field. It's good economists with good philosophical foundations. It's completely turning everything, challenging everything out there. Challenging everything out there.
It's got to go.
Yeah. And it's going to take time. And it's frustrating the hell because the stupidity is only increasing. It's not going away. Right, Corey, are you ready now? Corey? Thumb up, thumb down.
No, I'm gonna go ahead and pass. I'm sorry, I got busy in the super chat.
That's fine. That's fine. I noticed you're checking out whether you want to short AMC and GameStop. I noticed that. No, you're muted again. Sorry.
No, I am not about to short that.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Somebody's gonna get left holding the bag.
Well, the shorts are going to make a killing. They're going to make a lot of money if they get in at the right time, right? Somebody is going to make a fortune on GameStop and AMC, and some people already have. But somebody will short it, and the timing will be right. Somebody will have bought. I mean, I haven't looked, but I wonder if they're long dated options on AMC and GME, although they're probably very expensive. Because I'm sure a lot of people are looking at that. And the volatility is very high, which drives the price of options.
I did quite well this week. I made 100% return on it, and I had a automatic trailing stop that triggered, and I was so relieved when that was over.
So you wrote it up?
Yes, I wrote it up and exited. This is the first time I wrote upward. Usually I try to buy in when the market overreacts and there's a crash.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Good.
But
well,
I'm
glad some of the good guys are making money on it too, right? I that's a game I don't play. All right. Adam, do you want me to read the question you sent in, or do you want to ask a question live?
I think you'll read it faster.
It's long, so I'm gonna try to abbreviate. Okay.
Okay.
This is a question about copyrights, and this is it's an example of the example here is of a Korean show, by the way, that has been highly recommended to me by many people, although I have never seen it for some of the reasons that Adam mentions in his question, and it's a show called Dajang Gem, something like that, Dajang Gem. And it is a Korean show from, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, 2003. And what happens is that in the show is set in Korea in the past. And in the show, a court lady is raped and impregnated by a Chinese ambassador, right? And okay, so the Chinese ambassador is portrayed negatively. Now, the Chinese government has basically complained about this and ultimately went to the company and said that you either stop selling the show, basically, right? You stop distributing it across the world, you stop making it available, or we're gonna put an embargo on all the shows produced by you, right? All the shows that you have produced, we're going to embargo in China. And of course, China is a massive market. It's particularly a massive market for Korean shows, but it's a massive market for American shows. And this kind of story happens to American in Hollywood quite a bit. So now this is where this is where Adam's asking a question. So it's a bit of a tricky question. Okay, so there's a pirated copy of this show that is distributed through some Taiwanese distributor. It's called Jewel in the Palace, and it's sold. You can get it on eBay. And it says, the warning on the label says, we're not going to take returns, right? If it turns out the CDs you get from this pirated version are blank, tough, right? There's just no guarantees of anything here. So the question is, this is Adam, since I live in an earthquake-prone area and DVDs can be destroyed by an earthquake, I made digital backups of the original DVDs, which I bought when they were still legal. I could burn DVDs from the backup for my friends, or even send out copies of the backup, since some systems can mount and play ISOs. But I have not done so today. Question: what are the moral issues in this situation? Should I advise my friends to buy the Taiwanese version on eBay, knowing that it might just be a sting operation by the mainland government, screwing you by selling you blank CDs? Or just send copies of my backup ISOs to my friends? So this is a difficult question, because on the one hand, the company that owns the copyright on this has withdrawn distribution from it. And if you want to, and it's a company in a free part of the world, in South Korea. And under normal circumstances, it is incumbent on you to respect the property rights, to respect the copyright of a company that is functioning in a free society, a semi-free society, but as free as the world is today. On the other hand, coercion has been used against this company with regard to the specific product. And coercion has been used by an authoritarian government, a government that you owe no duty to or no responsibility to, the Chinese government. And that force was used for completely irrational reasons, without any relation to any violation of individual rights. So this is what you would call clearly a gray area. I would argue that given the coercion used by the Chinese, given that this company would not have withdrawn the distribution if not for that coercion, indeed it was distributing it until a few years ago when the Chinese stopped them from doing so, I would make copies and send them to my friends. And if you do, I'd want a copy.
It's well worth seeing. It's really, really good.
Yeah, everybody says that. It's still, my standard is, Mr. Sunshine. So, but people tell me it's that level.
It's probably even a little better because it has a strong theme of independence that Mr. Sunshine, which I really love, Mr. Sunshine, doesn't have.
Okay. So I'm eager to see it. I've been looking for it for years and couldn't find it. But given that this is coerced, given that this is as a consequence of force, I think it's legitimate. You're not turning this into a business. You're not selling it around. You're not putting it up on eBay. You're sending it to a few friends. I would say that is legit, but it is a gray area. All right. Are we good, Adam?
Yes, we are. And I'm going to see what I can do to package it in a way that will pass through the various email filters and get to you.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, Naveen.
Hey, Ron, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. First of all, just a quick comment on the AMC thing, right? Just to get back to that topic. I think there's other dynamics going on here that most people are not, that are new nowadays, that people don't really think about. One is that a large part of, there's a huge retail investor number that is much larger now than it used to be before like 2020. Supposedly 15% of all retail investors started investing in 2020, which is incredible number. So, and also a large part of AMC shares are held actually by institutional investors. About 25% are held by institutional investors or mutual funds, whatnot.
So these guys are making a lot of money for the institutional investors.
Yeah, kind of. But what I was trying to say is, generally speaking, on a normal day, most shares that are traded are shared by these guys. So the volume of the shares that are traded on a normal day, actually for ANC, I'm just looking, average volume actually in nowadays is about 180 million. I think before this whole GameStop saga, I think it was way, way less, right?
Yes, way
less. Now, yeah, now it's today traded 700 million shares today. So there's a huge liquidity issue that's going on here, which drives up the price because there's essentially no sellers on the other side,
But why aren't the institutions selling? I mean, if I was an institution that owned AMC, I would be selling into this. I'd sell every day. I would sell a chunk of my shares.
Yeah, I think some of them probably are, and a lot of them maybe are just sitting out of the market because they're just not traders. They're long-term investors.
As a long-term investor, you get out now and you
probably. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So I'm not sure what are all the things happening there, but just interesting. But my question was, I wanted to ask a question about inequality in a different from a different angle that we don't usually talk about. And when people talk about inequality in growing inequality or whatnot, right? I think there is a certain kind of unjust inequality that's in the marketplace, but not in the way that the left talks about. It's got a lot to do with how government is influencing the marketplace, right? So just a few examples is, for example, the government kept reducing interest rates over the past, 30, 40 years, right? Every year they keep reducing. So this allows all the growth companies to keep borrowing money. So, so that creates what's called asset price inflation, right? Because your stock price keeps going up because they keep borrowing money. And, they're also promising to keep interest rates lower, right? Fed basically has an implicit thing that will keep it low. So they're encouraging people to keep borrowing to service their debt. So that's another thing which also keeps asset prices up. And then they're also buying up corporate bonds, which is another thing that helps these things. There was a regulation, again, 2006, this is a Pension Protection Act. There was a regulation which basically says to your employees, you cannot offer, whichever mutual funds you're offering, you have to charge the same fees as the lowest fee out there, right? Like which is usually an index fund, So irrespective of what the people end up choosing, you have to charge the lowest fees, and also you have to follow this thing called the prudent man law. So you have to justify the investment that you're offering to your employees. So most companies, they just say, screw it, we'll just offer index funds, right? That's what people offer, and so there's a large amount of today's market is actually in index funds. And index funds are, for the most part, they're market cap weighted and they're float adjusted. But so what that does is the big companies keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So which is one main reason why the Facebook, all the FANG stocks just keep going up all the time, right? Because people keep buying more and more. As their market cap increases, the index funds buy more, so it keeps going up. So what that does to these companies is now you have leverage. Your stock price is so high, your market cap is so high, you have so much cash flow. So you can use that as a leverage to crowd out the other companies in the marketplace, and you can use that as leverage to hire the best people. You bring them all, you can offer them stock options, whatnot, right? So you do that, and that's a big reason why there's one Apple. There's only two app stores, iPhone, Android. There's not much other competition out there. One, Microsoft, Facebook, whatnot. So there is a way in which there's huge loss of opportunity in the marketplace because other companies cannot really compete in this kind of, And I haven't even touched regulation. There's so much regulation that the cost of dealing with this regulation is so high that people can't compete with a company like Amazon, because Amazon will just crowd you out. They, like somebody was just mentioning, they'll not make money for the longest amount of time because they can afford to do that. A smaller company cannot afford to do that. So there's these perversions in the marketplace because of what the government is doing, which keeps all these big companies staying big, and many more great products just never see the light of the day. You know, I think we need to acknowledge that thing, that there is unjust inequality in the marketplace, but just not in the way that the left talks about, just in a completely different way.
Yeah, so I agree with some of that, but I don't agree with all of it. And it's because I don't think it's completely right. For example, I don't think it's true that the government has manipulated interest rates downward for 40 years since 1982. I think most of that is the market pricing interest rates down significantly because inflation has gone away, because the Federal Reserve managed the money supply better, not well, because you can't do it well, right? It's always going to be distorted and perverted. But the fact is that price inflation has come down. I don't think that most of the stock market increases from 1982 until today are product of asset inflation in the negative sense. I think 90% of the stock market increases since 1982, and maybe I'm exaggerating, but the vast majority of a consequence of success, a consequence of just massive innovation, huge product, new products. If you look at Apple used to be a little company until about 2000 and something. It was a little company, and it really, until the iPhone, it was pretty small, and then it became the biggest company in the world, not because of inflation, but because it created the iPhone, and that gave it, that became incredibly popular. And the reason there are only two phones has much more to do with the networking effect than it has to do with regulation. Even without regulation, it's unlikely there would be many more than two phones. Just like in many types of products, there's limited variation. Where you have networking effects, you're going to have fewer competitors. It's why Microsoft didn't really have a competitor. But Apple was tiny. It was insignificant, right? But it really didn't have a competitor because of the networking effect that Microsoft created through DOS, not because of regulation, not because of government. Now, where I agree with you is that it's almost impossible to separate the factors out. That is, it's almost impossible to figure out what is due to, I have something to say about debt as well. We'll get to that in a minute. But it's very difficult to separate out what is a consequence of regulations that protect size. And there's no question, size provides companies with economies of scale to deal with regulations. Small companies can't. And that's absolutely right. And that's a real challenge and a real problem, and why, and it holds back the number of small companies. And if we had fewer regulations, there'd be many more small companies competing with the big guys, and there'd be a lot more dynamism in the marketplace. But again, how much of an effect is that? Nobody knows. We just don't know. And given the amount of money that venture capitalists are willing to invest in small companies, huge quantities, more today than at any point in human history, by orders of magnitude, even more than 10 years ago, 20 years ago, suggests to me that venture capitalists believe that there's a lot of space for small companies to compete with the big guys, even if it's to sell to the big guys, but it's still a lot of space for small companies to innovate and to produce and to create and to build, because otherwise they wouldn't be putting, I can't remember the number right now, but it's the largest number ever, right, in terms of venture capital. And these are smart guys, so they know what they're doing. So again, there's something real underneath the facade of inflation and underneath the regulatory effect that's going on. And we shouldn't discount that. Too many libertarians and some objectivists think, oh, it's, the government distorts the market so much that we can't give credit to the people who created the wealth. No, I mean, Amazon ran at a loss, not because of regulation, because it was small. When it ran at a loss, it was tiny. It could barely pay for the regulatory costs. That's part of the reason why it was running at a loss. It ran at a loss because it was run by a visionary who managed to convince financial markets, even after the 2000 crash in the NASDAQ, to convince financial markets to keep funding him. And in 2002, interest rates were low, but long-term rates, which he had to borrow at, were not that low. And triple B bonds, which was what he was probably rated at the time, were not that cheap. And yet he raised capital, and he raised capital to keep growing the business, even though he was losing money. It had nothing to do with government. Government played no role in Amazon's success, in my view. I mean, maybe a minor role, but overall, you know, an insignificant role. And he went up against a giant called Walmart, who could do everything that you describe: raise debt, use economies of scale to manage regulation, and he crushed them. He crushed them online, and he crushed them in logistics, which is what was Walmart's strength. So no, Amazon is a massive achievement of a market player. And if there was a role of government, it was an insignificant minor role. Now let's take this whole idea of debt, right? Companies
So
go
right
out
now-
into
Right now, apparently, the corporate debt to percentage of GDP is like extremely high.
Yeah, it's very high right now, and that makes complete sense, right? If I could borrow at basically zero from the Federal Reserve, I would do it all day. I would have a massive debt. I mean, as it is, I've got a massive mortgage, the biggest mortgage I could ever imagine in my life ever having. But you know what? I'm paying 3.75% on it, which is high, but I live in Puerto Rico. But I can make more than 3.75 in the marketplace. Why would I not take on the biggest mortgage humanly possible? I've always been like this, but I always take on as much debt as I can if the interest rate is low and they're offering me 0% credit card balance transfer. Give them to me. I can make more than 0%, right? Even in this low interest rate environment. So, but that's a market phenomenon. Banks or credit cards were offering 0% balance transfers in the 1990s when interest rates were much higher than they are today. Corporate debt, for example, put aside COVID. COVID has distorted everything because the Fed went nuts. And to some extent, it went nuts in 2008, but it certainly went nuts last year. And it bailed out all kinds of companies, and it's complete distortion. But that's not affecting Apple, by the way, because Apple wasn't bailed out. It's affecting poor companies that were doing poorly, who were bailed out by the Fed. But before COVID, if I went out into the corporate market to issue corporate debt, if my business did that, the market would look at my business and assess my bankruptcy risk, assess the risk of me paying the money back, assess the risk of me getting into financial distress, and set an interest rate. Now, that interest rate would somewhat be determined by what the Fed is doing, but not exclusively. You can't just say the Fed is distorting it all. It's not in those sectors of the economy where it's not buying. Now, granted, today it's buying everything. So today it's completely distorting. But that was not true in the past, and yet corporations were buying their debt, were issuing debt in the past as well. So I don't think that it's this cost of debt pre-COVID that drove the success of big tech. I don't think it's regulation. I don't think it's cheap money, and to the extent that they're cheap money, it's cheap money that private markets gave them because they believed they were good and they were solid and they were good bets. They weren't going to go bankrupt. Not because I think the government. I'm sure there's an element that says. This is interesting. I'm sure there's an element of you'll be bailed out. So I'll give you a low interest rate because I think you'll be bailed. Sure. But, yes, but I don't think that made Apple. I don't think that made Facebook. I don't think that made, certainly not Amazon. So I think it's a huge mistake not to give them the full credit and then say, yeah, and the market's distorted, and who knows what it would look like without them. But every reason in the world to believe that Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, Sergey Brin, whatever, would still be gazillionaires. Maybe, I would argue, richer than they are today. Amazon being bigger than it is today. If it didn't have to deal with the labor regulations and the not in my backyard for their warehouses and the trucking unions and all of that. Who knows how big Amazon could be today? So it could go the other way around. It could be that inequality would be even bigger. So we don't know, but don't let that cause you not to give credit where I think credit is due. That's my point.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. And I'll have to do more research on all the implications of regulation, I think, too. So,
well, I mean, it's awful, but the nice thing about tech is that tech, relative to everybody else, is relatively loosely regulated. So I can tell you stories about banking, right?
I mean, healthcare is huge.
Well, healthcare. I mean, I do bank investments. I'm an expert in banks. I can tell you nightmares about bank regulations, what it means for small little banks. But also the only reason small banks exist in the United States is because of regulation. There would be no small banks in the US if not for regulation. So it doesn't always work in the direction that you think it's going to work. So markets are pretty amazing things. All right, let's see. Who didn't I get to? Stephen. Stephen? All right, Stephen's quiet. So let's go to Deborah.
Hi, Yaron.
Hi.
So I have a question about, there's been a lot of back and forth on the podcast lately about you going skydiving and how much money it would take for you to do that. And I've just been so curious, where did that come from? And why are you so opposed to going skydiving?
I think because I said that I have a fear of heights. And so they're testing me. And I said I wouldn't go skydiving because I've got a fear of heights. So they're testing, you know, what it's going to take for me to overcome that fear and go skydiving. And they haven't reached the number yet, right? I think the last we were at $500,000, and I wouldn't go skydiving for $500,000. But I can give you the number, right? I think as we approach $1 million, you know, I would do it. And look, if you asked me 20 years ago, $500,000, I would have done it. And 25 years ago, I would have done it for $100,000. Today, it's going to cost you $1 million. So it's the effect of relative wealth. But it's interesting how the fear of heights, it's weird, it's irrational, but it becomes really visceral and physical. I fly all the time. I'm in airplanes all the time. I don't like it, but I'm fine with that. But for example, you know, in Toronto, you can go to this very tall building with the observation deck on top of it. It's like the needle thing. And there's an observation deck. And in an observation deck, there's a glass floor where it just goes right down, whatever the height of the thing is. It's just a glass floor. And my wife walks on it. She starts dancing on it. I can't step on it. I ultimately ran across it just because I can't look completely ridiculous. I had to show I could do something. So I ran across it. But just standing there would freak me out completely. And it's not rational, but it's also not worth spending a lot of money on a psychologist to try to cure me of, because it's not that important to me.
Understood. I have to say, as someone who also shares your fear of heights, in the sense that my stomach does flips if I'm standing on a glass, like a clear bottom thing. Yeah. I've made 300 skydives when I was in my 20s, and it did not trigger that. It did not trigger that feeling. It's a different kind of experience. If I went up onto a ladder, I would get the stomach flip. But if I was jumping out of the airplane, no problem. Different kinds of issues incur, but not that. So you still might have some hope if you're maybe interested in giving it a try.
Ain't happening. No, I see no upside to it, I guess, at this point. All right. Thanks, Deborah. All right, Stephen, are you there? If not, we're going to go to 917. 917? Is that Andrew?
Yes, it's Andrew.
There you go. Andrew's the only one who refuses to put his name in the thing. I have to.
And yet I do every time, which makes me feel even stupider because I'm doing something wrong. just want to let you know, I have a Greek plinth coming tomorrow for my terrace, which was the purchase of which was, I think, inspired by your rule for life to make physical spaces as beautiful as possible.
Good. I'm glad.
I'm excited for it. I wanted to ask you a psychological question. What do you think is the difference when an objectivist says, focus on yourself? What do you think the difference between that and the meaning of a narcissist focusing on themselves?
I think primarily for an objectivist, that means kind of a reminder to think and to use reality as their guide, right? So reality is the reference. But it is a reminder to use reason. It's a reminder to, to be rational. For narcissists, it's a reminder to check how others view him. So it's a completely second-handed approach. A narcissist is a complete second-hander. So his command is idea of focus on self is focus on how people think of me. Focus on how I can be better at appearing to other people. It's not reality as my sandbox. How do I manipulate reality? How do I exploit reality to make my life better? It's how do I position myself to appeal to other people? It's a primacy of consciousness, your consciousness and the consciousness of other people. It's all about consciousness. Reality plays no role in it. That makes sense?
Yes. And also, would you say values are an important part there too?
Yeah, I mean, again, an objectivist thinks in terms of what are my values, what will lead to my success, what will lead to my happiness, my flourishing. A narcissist thinks of what will lead to people liking me, what do people lead to people admiring me, what it lead to their. So he's more concerned with their values. Now he has none of his own. He has no. There's an essay in The Virtue of Selfishness. What is it? Selfishness Without a Self, I think. I think Nathaniel Branden wrote it, and I think he talks about that attitude where you have no self.
That's a little ironic, don't you think?
What's that?
That's a little ironic, don't you think?
Yes, for a variety of reasons we won't go into, but yes. All right. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks. Okay, let's go. I think Tom just joined us. Tom, you're up next if you got a question. Or not. Stephen, are you still there? All right, if one of the two of you unmutes and wants to ask a question, go ahead. So I don't know what happened to Tom. All right. Anyway, let's do a couple of super chat. Man, we've already gone an hour. All right, this was Jeff. Thank you. That was it's a very generous contribution. And he says, this is a question directed to your contributors, if they so choose to respond. And he says, could you say a few words about how your voluntary sponsorship of the show has benefited your self-interest, your self-interested life? So in other words, why do you contribute to the show? How is it a selfish act? So I assume Jeff wanted you to do that in the super chat. So maybe you've already done it. Maybe I missed that. But if you haven't, please participate. He put $100 behind that question. So it'd be great to see the answers. All right, let's see. At European ARI conference, this is a while ago, you stated intellectuals have learned after the fall of the Soviet Union not to exaggerate the collectivism sacrifice because Western populations would no longer tolerate it. Is this still the case? To some extent, I still don't think you can be an out and out communist or an out and out fascist or an out and out theocrat in the West today. I don't think we're there yet, but I do think we're moving in that direction. And I certainly think COVID has helped us along, has nudged us along towards a greater willingness to accept total sacrifice, total collectivism, total altruism. And I think you'll see more bolder authoritarians of left and right arguing for their collectivistic views. But yes, we lived through a period with the fall of the Soviet Union where communism was just not popular. And generally, after World War II, fascism was not popular, where generally there was this idea that the ideal is Sweden, the ideal is Denmark, the ideal is some kind of balance between some property rights, some regulations, some redistribution of wealth, some allowing you to become wealthier, but not too much. That kind of balance, that kind of mixed economy was the ideal. And that's what Fukuyama in his book, The End of History, in a sense, advocated. Liberal democracies, which are mixed economies, are the ideal form. As that is proving to fail with the response to COVID, with the economic struggles in Europe and the United States over the last 15 years post the financial crisis, I think the appeal of the liberal democracy is fading. You're seeing that in the US on the right and on the left, and you're seeing a movement towards collectivism on both sides. So that is changing. I enjoy you answering my questions and supporting the show, but I have a tendency to try to answer my question on my own and will spend long amounts of time trying. How do you decide when to ask others versus investigate solo? If I have somebody I can ask and trust, I lean towards asking and trusting because it's a shortcut, right? You still have to do the work because you still don't know it because I told it to you, in a sense, right? Just because, I gave you a good answer that kind of makes sense to you in the moment doesn't mean you know it. You have to make that answer yours. All I'm doing in answering your questions is giving you a shortcut that will allow you to be more efficient in your thinking about it. So like Naveen said, he still has to do some more thinking. And that's exactly the right response, right? Not, oh, you're on. Thank you for enlightening me. Now I know the truth, right? That would be the wrong answer. The right answer is, that's interesting. Let me go do more research because I have to make that answer mine. I have to figure out if you're right or not. I have to buy into it. I have to understand it. And that only you can do. All a teacher can do, Leonard Peikoff once said, the two things good teachers do. They entertain, which I hope I do a little bit of, and they indicate. They indicate. In other words, they point you in the right direction for you to think. So when you ask me a question, don't take it as, okay, now I got the truth. It's been revealed to me. Take it as, that's interesting. I need to think about that and figure out if I agree with that and if that makes sense. Right? Then it becomes yours if you do the thinking. So I'm saving you time, not replacing your solo investigation. And in that sense, ask away because I'm saving you time. And time is the most precious thing you have. That's not a cliche. It's actually true. Okay, do you think most leftists don't take seriously the argument that welfare cripples self-esteem because they're materialists who don't consider man's spirit to be anything? They only focus on the concrete material, food and shelter. To a large extent, yes. And Ayn Rand thought that too, that the left was dominated by Marxism, which is materialism. And therefore it's muscle, it's food, it's shelter, it's those kind of things. Who has self-esteem. Who has time for that? Now, they, of course, deny it, and they don't, and they're not consistent about that. Part of it is that they're lazy thinkers. Part of it is that they don't really have any respect for individuals. So, so they don't think in terms of the self-esteem of individuals. But yeah, it's very much the idea of their materialism, and they think they know better than people. They don't think that working hard gains you self-esteem. Most leftists are well-educated, and they think that only they can get self-esteem. That to be self-esteem, you have to be like them. You have to be smart and well-educated and have a cool job. No bricklayer could actually have self-esteem. They didn't read The Fountainhead, right? Where there's a bricklayer with self-esteem. And they have a very low opinion of human beings, of particularly common people, the people they supposedly care about. They have a very low opinion of them. That's why they want to take care of them. They're like children. They need to be taken care of. If they had a high opinion of them, they'd want to set them free. They'd want them to be self-reliant. What are some examples of regulatory costs? I mean, there's no end to those, but I'll give you a few. I'm regulated by the SEC in my financial side business. They just came out with a 500-page document that specifies what I can and cannot do when it comes to marketing my fund. Okay, so what's the cost, the regulatory cost? Well, the regulatory cost is I have to read the thing. I have to understand it. I probably have to consult a lawyer to make sure that my practices are consistent with it, because it's 500 pages of legalese, BS, contradictory nonsense. I hope I don't get in trouble with the SEC for saying that. I have to have a compliance department that makes sure that I comply with all these things, because what one human being can keep track of all this stuff? This is just marketing. There's a similar thing to our relate to investors. There's a similar thing for our trade. So I have to have compliance. So it eats up part of my time. It eats up my money because I have to pay people for it. I have to pay lawyers. We have probably, and I don't know if there are any lawyers on the call, but we probably have 5x the lawyers we would have in a free market, maybe 10x the lawyers we would have in a free market. There's an accountants, lawyers and accountants. There are way too many of them, way too many of them. And that's a huge drag on the economy, because these people could actually be doing something productive instead of just helping us comply with regulations, which is what many of them do. Or, I always kid, I have a tax accountant that I love. I think he's a great guy. But I always kid with him, you'd actually have to get a real job if we had a proper tax system, or no taxes. But even like a postcard taxes, he'd lose his job. He'd actually have to work for a living. So all of that is regulatory cost. But beyond that, it's both active costs and passive costs. The passive cost is things you would do that you're now not doing because you're not allowed to. And all the things you do that you wouldn't have to do if not for the regulations. And you've got both of those costs. And I suspect that the passive is bigger than the active. That is, the regulations constrain you from doing the things that you would otherwise want to do. And that's the huge cost. Some people call it opportunity cost. I don't love that phrasing, but yeah. Tanker Tessa says, YB made me a truth seeker. Thank you. Good. That is my goal in life. Make people truth seekers. All right. Those were the $20 plus questions. I think I got all of them. I will get to the lower valued questions after another round with our panelists here. All right, so we're gonna start again. We're going to start again with Nick.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. On Tuesday, you made an excellent point, and I was wondering about the modern left and the old left, and from the 60s and the roots. Now, a lot of the old left, I mean, they are the professors to the modern left. You know what I mean? They've taught them top down, and you can see the way Bernie Sanders comes across to a large crowd. He comes across like a Pied Piper professor, and they just gobble up everything he says. Now, with the old left, from what my understanding is, there's, you look at Bernie Sanders, there's a redistributional element to it, where it's all about redistribution. There's an egalitarian element to it. There's a nihilistic element, right? Now, with the new left, they have an obsession with a hyper obsession with race and gender. Their anti-Semitism, another hyper obsession with their anti-Semitism with Israel and so forth. Am I missing stuff? I mean, is it worth doing a show on all that in terms of the roots?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense now you've got the old left, which is what Ayn Rand talked about, right? The pre-1960s left, which was primarily dominated by Marx and by Marx's influence. They were about classes, and they were about, but they had this idea that Marx had of progress. They wanted a better world. They wanted progress. They wanted advancement. They wanted the betterment of mankind. I mean, Marx's utopia. Everybody's happy. Everybody's happy. Everybody gets what they want. Everybody expresses themselves individualistically in his utopia. Now, you have to kill a lot of people to get there, but that's the end result, right? And there's a sudden focus on industrialization and so on. Then you get the new left, the kind of 60s generation, where now progress is not that good anymore. Now you've got environmentalism, right, interjected into the whole thing. Now it's about a return to nature. And there's a lot of nihilism associated with the new left. But it's still rooted in classes, in the struggle between classes. If you watch Cornel West is an interesting leftist. He's a black professor from Harvard who is not a critical race guy, right? He's an old style 60s leftist who believes in, as you said, like Bernie, redistribution of wealth, class warfare. It's not about race. We should be colorblind. It's really about classes. It's about the injustice of capitalism. So that new left of the 60s, some of them just became yuppies. Some of them became university professors. When they became university professors, the nihilistic side declined, and they became much more like the old left, right? Focused on class. The people they taught, the academics today, the younger ones, they saw inequality not just through a dimension of
economics.
They now saw inequality through the dimension of gender, sex, and race. And they adopted the nihilism and egalitarianism of the new left from the 60s. And they've taken the nihilism and the egalitarianism. Remember, egalitarianism is about everybody should be the same. And they've expanded the definition beyond economics. And they are far more nihilistic, even than the new left of the 60s. They're far worse than the left that Ayn Rand was so horrified by in the 1960s. This is a whole new step in the wrong direction that these leftists have taken. So yes, you're getting progressively worse. But it's not, just like in the 60s, my belief is it's not tenable. The American people are not egalitarians. And the American people don't believe that they are racists, even though some of them are. So it cannot succeed, just like it didn't succeed ultimately. It succeeds at the margin. You get laws, you get rules, you get things passed. But the culture doesn't become massively far left. There's a backlash against that. And the question is, what will that backlash against it look like? And that's what scares the bejesus out of me.
Do you think nihilism drives it, or is it just ignorance, or is it? I don't know if it's you listen to AOCs, and do you think it's nihilism? I think it's just pie in the sky.
It's a combination of nihilism, emotionalism, and ignorance. But it's a lot of these people should know better, so it can't just be ignorance.
Well, Bernie should know better, but the AOCs are the.
But he's just a power luster. Bernie's just a power luster. But and the AOC is just kind of naively, she's evading. She should know better. There's a certain nihilism there, and there's a certain trying to take her morality seriously.
She likes
and it's cool, and it's also cool. All the cool kids on the left.
She likes her $3,000 wardrobes, and she likes her $60,000 new Tesla that she just got. So she loves the fruits of capitalism.
Well, of course they do. They all do. I didn't know she got a Tesla.
Well, she's got to look hip.
Elon Musk must be proud. All right, let's see who the hell. Naveen, we're going to. This is in a different order this time. I'm going by who appears on my screen.
Iran, yes. So I was having an argument on WhatsApp, discussion on WhatsApp with somebody about the Federal Reserve, right? And they were bringing up that, hey, think about 1913 when Fed was funded. It was funded because many financial institutions were failing because they were making irrational investment decisions or whatnot. So the Fed was funded, all the stuff. So anyway, my point to him was that you cannot take away private risk. You cannot take away the risk of people investing in bad things by putting a central authority. All you're doing is you're transferring the private risk to public risk, and you're delaying it and you're magnifying it. And the Fed, I heard, played a big part in how deep and how long the Great Recession went.
Yeah.
So can you talk about that and what role the Fed played in that?
Yeah.
And also, second thing is in a free market, right? How would it function without the Fed and the U.S. Treasury, the government Treasury?
Yeah, it's I mean, those are big questions. Just briefly, because we don't have a lot of time. There was no financial crisis in 1913. The financial crisis happened in 1907, before there was a Fed, and it was handled. It was handled by private banks. It was handled primarily by J.P. Morgan, who got bankers into a room and said, "We're going to figure this out." And they sat down and they negotiated and they solved the problem. They provided liquidity to markets where they needed to be liquidity. They allowed certain companies and banks to go bankrupt, and they funded, bailed out in quotes, but I don't consider it a bailout, other companies. And they did it all based on private risk assessment and private incentives. That is what offended the politicians. The politicians looked at them and said, in a sense, why does JP Morgan have all the fun? Or why does JP Morgan have all the power? We want to be able to do that. How come he gets to decide who survives and who dies? We want to do that, right? We're more important. We're in the public interest. He's just doing it for his own selfish reasons. He's trying to make money. And that was the basis on which the Federal Reserve was founded. It was a power grab by the central authority. And it was a power grab directly targeted at the self-interested motivations of a JP Morgan. And it was clearly to get to JP Morgan, right? So that's why it was founded. Since the Fed has been founded, we've had more crises, more volatility, more economic problems than we had before. They've been worse, deeper, and more sustained over time than we had before the Fed was created. Certainly during the Great Depression, the Fed was a major cause of turning a recession into a depression. What should have been just a recession turned into a depression, primarily because of the Fed, but also because of Hoover and then FDR, right? How it did that, it did it primarily by, let me say one more thing. It's so complicated, all these things. The banking system in the United States has never been free. Never been free. It's always been regulated. Of all the industries in the US, banks have always been regulated, more than railroads. And as a consequence, even the banking era before the Fed was created was not a free market. It was massively distorted. And as a consequence of the distortion, that's, by the way, one of the causes, major cause of the 1907 financial crisis was the distortions created by regulation to the banking system. Canada, which shockingly has a history of far less and better regulations of their banking system, has never had a financial crisis in its entire history. The United States, during the same period of time, has had 13 financial crises. To Canada, 0. Canada established a central bank after, I think, World War II. So in 44, 45, way after the United States. So that's one realm in which Canada was way ahead of the US and therefore was much healthier. So just like we talked about before, it's so hard to differentiate what's regulated, what's not. What would have happened on the market? What wouldn't happen on the market? What was the Fed? What wasn't the Fed? You can kind of peel the onion and figure it out, but it's work. It's a lot of work. And even then, there's no parallel universe where you could say, but this is how it worked with a free market. This is what would have happened. You can speculate, but you don't know. All right,
Thanks.
Deborah.
Okay, so this question is about, I really enjoyed your appearance on Lex Friedman's show with Michael Malice recently.
Thanks.
That was just so interesting and entertaining at the same time. And I was pleasantly surprised, I guess I would say, that at the end, it sounded, at least on listening to the podcast, it sounded like he'd kind of come to a point of agreeing with you about government versus not. That was the way it seemed. And I know people don't just flip like that though, but I was just kind of wondering what your impression was of his perspective. Do you think it kind of shifted as a result of that discussion?
I don't
sounded
really,
like there was a lot more common ground than we
yeah,
thought.
I don't really think so. I think he was trying to, and he kept interrupting me with kind of side issues, and we never really got into the meat of the discussion about anarchy. And I think that was purposeful, whether conscious or unconscious. I think it was purposeful. Look, I like him. He's a nice guy. He's very friendly. He's funny. Sometimes the humor is not my humor, and I think inappropriate. But general, and some of that was cut by Lex. So there were scenes that Lex cut, right, where the humor got a little, uncomfortable for me, and I think Lex to some extent as well. But overall, Malice, he's a likable guy, and he surprised me by how much he knew about Ayn Rand as a person, even though I don't think he understands the philosophy very well. He knows her biography. He knows about her a lot. In some ways, in some areas, probably more than I do. I don't think he moved at all on the anarchy thing. I think it was another way of dismissing me. So he said, oh, well, Iran, okay. So if such a bizarre situation would have happened where the government really did only this, okay, I could live with that. I will do that. But my ideal is still, he would say, real anarchy. And he didn't, if you watch it, he didn't actually engage with any of the points I was making. He shifted around, and in the end, the way not to engage with the point I was making was to say, okay, if it's that kind of government, I can live under it. But that was a way not to engage, not to actually get to the heart of the issue.
I see.
He never responded to my point about objective law. He never responded to my point about violence and legitimacy. The most he would say is, well, that's ridiculous. That was kind of his dismissal. So that was my impression. But again, I enjoyed the show. It suggested that maybe I need a sidekick for the Yaron Brook show, because a lot of people have said, hey, Yaron, if your tone in the show was more like the tone with Malice, like a little bit of humor, not yelling at the microphone all the time, a little bit more laid back, a little bit more relaxed, then you get a bigger audience. And it's true. It probably is true, but I can't artificially make myself do that. And I'm not that funny. So I need a sidekick. So if anybody knows of a sidekick who I can use for that purpose, let me know.
So any future appearances on Lex's show planned? I've been just really enjoying his show lately, ever since I discovered it through you. And especially that 3-person thing with him sort of moderating, keeping the people in the corners. It was just something about that formula I enjoyed. It was 4.5 hours long, and I was like, oh, it's over.
That's amazing.
It felt like less time because it was so good.
So, I think so. I mean, I like Lex. I like him personally. I like his show a lot. I think he does good work. I think he likes me. I mean, we seem to get along when we're together. He listens to this show. Once in a while, he'll be on the chat, and he'll show up on the chat. So he's definitely friendly and sympathetic. He's certainly non-objectivist. I don't think he would suggest that he is, but he's sympathetic, is interested in objectivism. So I'd be surprised. So I think I will be on the show. He wants some spacing between when he has guests, so that's understandable. If we can figure out who I could be on with, that would be great. I mean, I'd love to do a show, for example, with Eric Weinstein and Lex. I think that would be terrific. Maybe we could get Jordan Peterson, or maybe we could get, I mean, a lot of people that we could do as a 3 thing that Lex could get, who I couldn't, right? Who I couldn't just invite.
Sam Harris, that would be cool. He was on Lex recently.
Sam won't do it. Sam won't do it.
I would love to hear you talk with him about free will.
He drives me crazy.
But, yeah.
He won't do it. I wish he would. And I'm not sure I'm the best person to go up against Sam Harris, because there's a sense in which he's quicker than me, or deals with abstractions, very high level abstractions, faster than I do. And he knows the neuroscience in ways I don't. But yeah, that would be, I would enjoy that. Any one of those guys would be good. I don't think Sam would agree. I don't know about Jordan, but I think we could get Eric Weinstein, and maybe we could find some other people who would be good.
Cool. I'll look forward to that. Thank you.
Sure. All right, Adam.
Thank you. I don't really have a very good question to ask at this time.
No problem.
I'll try for one, which is, what do you think of intellectual property lawyers, in particular patent lawyers, who go and try to have their cases tried in the one place in the US with the highest illiteracy rate, which is East Texas. So they're trying to get a jury that doesn't have the conceptual background to understand complicated things like patents. What do you think of that practice?
Well, I think the real issue is with jury trials for complex cases like that. I don't think we should have them. I mean, but if you have jury trials, it's hard to blame the lawyer for trying to get the best outcome he can. That's what he's being paid for. I'm much more critical of the system than of the people taking advantage of the system.
Thank you.
All right, Andrew.
Hi. You're on?
Yep, I can hear you.
So the highly religious have all of these restrictions on men being able to see women and touch women and be in the same room with women. And one time you were covering this and you said, I think it shows that they don't think they can control themselves. Why do you think that is?
Why do you repeat the question? I didn't quite get the end of it. Why do I think
one time you were talking about really highly religious and how they have all these restrictions on their dealings with women.
Yeah.
You know, men's women.
Yeah.
And you said, I think it implies that they don't think they can control themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think that. That's absolutely what they say. Why do I think that is? It's the
like, what do you think is their philosophy? Is there something in their philosophy as being highly religious that leads to that?
Yeah, it's the flip side of why liberals, why the left, what was it before? It's the flip side of why the left wants to give people shelter and money, and they don't care about their self-esteem. Because the left cares about the material world and it doesn't care about the spiritual world. The right cares about the spiritual world and doesn't care about the material world. The material world is gross. The material world is sinful. Sex is sinful and gross, and your sexual drive is materialistic. It's anti-spiritual. It divorces you from your ability to commune with the spirits. And by the way, this is Christianity, but it also exists in almost every mind-body split. To some extent, it exists in Plato, right? So this idea is that sex is a distraction from the noble pursuits of the soul, but it's very powerful. It's the body asserting itself over the mind, and men can't control it. It's so powerful, and the sexual drive overwhelms. In particular, if we happen to glance the ankle of a female, it drives us crazy and we can't control ourselves. And we're likely in a moment of uncontrolled passion to rape the poor girl. So in order to protect us from committing that sin, we don't really care that much about the woman, right? Getting raped, that's not that important because women are second-class citizens. But in order to prevent us from committing the sin of the rape and immersing ourselves in a materialistic emotion, we need the women to cover up. We need to make sure that they never show us an ankle. And if they do, it's their fault, right? And you see that. You see that in Judaism. A married woman won't shake, is it a married woman? Unmarried woman won't, something like that, won't shake your hand because that's too tempting for you. Not for her, for you. She won't sit with you on the same sofa. She won't stay in the same room with you unless another chaperone is there. Exactly the same as the Muslims, exactly the same as the ultra-Orthodox, cultish Christians. All of these religions have the same attitude towards sex and towards women. You know that a very religious Jew gets up every morning and the first prayer he makes upon waking up is, thank you, God, for not making me a woman. I mean, literally, that is the prayer. Baruch shelo asani isha. Right? Thank you for not making.
What is that? What is that like? Why?
Because women represent the material. Women represent sex. Women, by the way, for example, for ultra-Orthodox Jews, the women work. They manage the family. They have 8 children, and they provide and they work. The man studies. He goes to yeshiva and he studies all day long. He doesn't make a living. I mean, maybe at some point he does, but for many years, he is there to cultivate the spiritual world. That is the role of the male in Judaism, at least, right? And to some extent, if you listen to certain evangelical cults, certain Christian cults, certain Christian sects, it's the same thing. The woman represents the material. The woman represents the sin of materialism. The male is the spiritual. And think about the Garden of Eden. Everything was fine until the woman tempted the man. And that was the fall of mankind. It was the woman's fault. Because what did she tempt him with? With an apple, with something sensual, with something material. So certainly all the Judeo-Christian religions have that because it's deep in Judaism. Now, Judaism also has some female heroes, but they're clearly the exception to that. But it is a consequence of the mind-body dichotomy and a consequence of viewing women in a particular way. Unfortunately, even Aristotle had a negative, or not a negative, but a negative, certainly from a female perspective, negative view of women as kind of second-class human beings, right? Not capable of the same kind of thing, the spiritual, the rational faculty.
Yeah, he had an excuse of being alive a couple of thousand years ago.
Well, but so did the original Jews, so did the original Christians. But yes, the fact that they still hold onto it says a lot about the barbarism. Yeah. And this is barbarism, the barbarism of Orthodox religion in all its forms. It doesn't matter which religion it is. All right. Yes.
Thanks.
Daniel.
A group, the Bethany Christian Services, which is described as America's largest Protestant foster care and adoption agency, is asking for changes to the 1994 Multi-Ethnic Placement Act, MIPA. They complain that the law prevents social workers from ensuring the protection and support of Black children's cultural heritage. Its senior vice president for domestic programs, Sherry Williams, said that the current law goes too far towards mandating a colorblind approach to adoption. We're not saying there needs to be some kind of woke test. What we are saying is it's very harmful to children to go into this situation with a colorblind philosophy. Just on the face of it, is there even such a thing as a Black culture, a white culture, a Jewish culture? I mean, I believe there's an American culture. Are they even starting from a reasonable spot, even assuming, you know, their comments on we really shouldn't be colorblind were there?
I think there is such a thing as a Jewish culture or I mean, I would say an American Jewish culture, right? American Jews, I mean, we have certain inside jokes that other people don't get, right? We like certain really, really disgusting sweet wine that nobody else likes. Good for you guys for not liking it. And I hate it too, but and I think there is a black culture, and I think there is the question really is, should there be? Right? And my view is no, they shouldn't. That is that the only reason there's a Jewish culture is because Jews hang out together. And they live together, they live close to one another. The only reason that there is black culture is because all the blacks live in the same place together. And a lot of that is a consequence of red zoning decades ago, right? Where they couldn't break out of that. And that is true of, you know, when the Irish came here, there was Irish American culture. Is there today? A lot less. Is there an Italian American culture? Yeah, to some extent, because they stuck together. Should they have stuck together? Probably not. It's the old collectivism. So the more American we become, which means the more individualistic we become, the more we abandon our collectivism and our tribal origins,
right?
The more we will have maybe American culture, and there might be subcultures. There might be a Chicago culture, or a New York culture, right? Or it certainly is a Silicon Valley culture, right? We know that there's certain energy, certain vibe, certain attitude. That's a Silicon Valley culture, but that's healthy, right? But it wouldn't be identifiable based on color, skin, ethnic grouping, national origin, things like that.
And that's the thing. I wonder if American Jewish parents or couple wanted to adopt a black child, what does it mean to protect his black heritage, his black cultural heritage?
It's meaningless. It's collectivism. It's it's complete tribalism. It's racism. It's horrible. And it's horrible to I mean, I think one of the most beautiful things that are happening in the world from this perspective is intermarriage between people from different backgrounds. It's the fact that you see white couples with black kids and black couples with white kids. It's the fact that there are people out there in the world living a colorblind life. That is the positive sign, I think, and retracting from that and going backwards is truly horrific.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
All right, Corey Flores.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you.
More of just a comment on how surprised I was again about with this whole Israeli-Palestinian conflict, especially in Australia, just how potent altruism seemed to be. Usually, it seems a lot more subtle. Altruism, like you actually have to dig to find the altruism. But this conflict has just brought out, the altruist in everyone, who accepts the doctrine or the. So yeah, I was just really quite shocked at how much it has infected the culture, the Western culture specifically. And I felt like, reading Ayn Rand and Leonard Peikoff and listening to the lectures, it's like, yeah, I understand now. I can see how altruism affects the culture. But then it's like, oh, now I really see it. That spiral of knowledge that they talk about. And you keep going back and yeah. So
and you're right. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict brings out the altruism in an explicit way that you don't typically get. And it's particularly ugly, and it's particularly vicious, but it's the same altruism that affects people's decisions about almost everything in life. But one of the reasons they get so passionate about it is because it's so far away, and because it doesn't really affect them in any way, one way or the other. People are big altruists when it's a long way away from them. But if it involved them actually sacrificing, they're more reluctant to do that.
Yeah, exactly. All right, thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks for support, Corey. And it's you who I kicked off of YouTube, right? So I'm glad to have you back.
Yeah. No, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that.
Sure. Stefan, Stefan Lamb, are you with us? Do you want to ask a question? Stefan's there, but he either can't unmute or doesn't want to, but that's okay. All right. Let's see. Oh, we got some super chat questions. All right. Okay. This was the first question asked, but it wasn't a $20 question, so I didn't answer it first. All right. Stefan is saying, sorry about that. All right. Carl Barney says he can't go to Ocon to see Peikoff honored. I respect your position based on what he said, but it seems to stem from him feeling excluded. Maybe letting him go would lead to a new thaw. Why are you speculating? I mean, why would AOI invite somebody to a conference who's been spending the last, 6 months attacking it? Why would we invite somebody to a conference, to attend a conference, who is trying to undermine what you're doing and trying to cause you to question, to question everything that we do, to cause you not to contribute money to the Institute, and ultimately to replace its entire leadership? Why would that leadership invite him to the conference? So you don't invite people who are trying to undermine you and trying to attack you. We're not altruists. We're just not. We're not sacrifices. You don't get, there's no such thing as lifetime passes. People change. And when people become what they become, when people attack you, you don't have to embrace them. You don't have to be friends with them. And it would be ridiculous. It would be ridiculous. Just because you share a particular value, if you share that is not enough to overcome the kind of things that he has said personally about me and generally about the Institute. Anyway, but I will leave it at that, because I don't think this is of a particular value. God. All right. I don't know if this is a question. The greatest paradox of life: the lesser the options, the more we tend to take action. The greatest paradox of life: the lesser the options, the more we tend to take action. I don't think that's true at all. I think the more options, the more likely you are to take action. That would say that the more we regulate, i.e. reduce options, the more stuff gets done. It's exact opposite. Exact opposite. So I don't buy that. I made a great deal of money this week with AMC. Good for you. But I exited 10% off its high today. And I'm so happy to be out for at least overnight. I know this isn't investing. Yeah, it's not investing. You're gambling. And you might be good at this type of gambling because it's gambling on what you think other people are going to do, right? But it's as long as you know what it is, that it's not investing. I think, and you treat it in a healthy way. That's good. Let's see. Do intellectuals hate Ayn Rand because she challenges altruism or skepticism? Oh, it's hard to tell. I think mainly altruism, because that, no, it's hard to tell. I mean, I think it depends on the field of the intellectuals. I think the philosophers, maybe it's because she challenges skepticism. I think for most intellectuals, it's the altruism. Like non-philosophy professor intellectuals. It is far better for a man to go wrong in freedom than to go right in chains. Yes. There's a sense in which there is no such thing as going right in chains. It's not right if it's in chains. Something that you do that is forced upon you, that you don't do out of your own choice, you don't gain any value from. What do you make of Germans today? Are they repressed Nazis just waiting to come out? Not in particular, I don't think. I don't think they're that different than other Europeans. But, you know, could fascism rear its ugly head in Germany? Absolutely. But I could also see it coming about in France. It's already starting in Hungary and in Poland. You know, I think Germans tend to take their ideas more seriously, and that's why they tend to be more, they tend to express these ideas more extremely. But I don't see anything in the Germans today that would suggest they are worse than other Europeans. Did you like the movie A Bronx Tale with Robert De Niro? Are there any good philosophical themes you noticed in the movie? I can't remember Bronx Tale. Sorry, I can't remember seeing it. So you know, it's a $500 to get me to watch a movie, so that I can't remember. Do you think Hitler felt guilty on some level? No, probably not. I mean, he felt bad. He was never happy. He felt repressed. He felt depressed. He felt angry. He felt like he was a victim, even when he was ruler of the world. I don't think he felt guilty for what he did. Adam, is this related to one of the questions here?
Yes, it is. With respect to the question in Germany, unfortunately, one of America's contributions to what goes by the name of philosophy is pragmatism. And pragmatism is a heck of a lot worse than anything produced in Germany. What do you think this implies for the future of America in the world?
That's a lighthearted question. So I don't think. Let me take this view. I don't think pragmatism is worse, only because of this. Pragmatism is not a governing ideology. It's the same thing I say about the left often. Pragmatism can't inspire. Pragmatism can't give you a real, you don't go out and go to war over pragmatism, over a pragmatic ideal. There is no such thing as a pragmatic ideal. What pragmatism does is it eviscerates the good. It eviscerates the good ideas. And in America in particular, what pragmatism has done is destroyed the founding. It's destroyed the Enlightenment. It's destroyed the ideas of Americanism, thus leaving America susceptible to the Germans, right? To Kant and his heirs. So pragmatism, like a lot of what the left does, in my view, clears the way for the fascists to come in and take over. So in that sense, Trump cannot be successful. He failed. His political party lost. He lost because he stands for nothing. The problem with Trump is not what he did as much as that he's paving the way for much, much worse. The Germans within the Republican Party, if you will, the German philosophers within the Republican Party, the nationalist conservatives, the religionists, right, who will then sweep in with an ideology, not a pragmatic ideology, an ideology that will then really destroy America. All right, back to these super chats. Did you watch Sam Harris interview with Lex Friedman? I watched parts of it. I can't watch Lex Friedman for 3 hours, so I skim them. Sam Harris puts me to sleep. That's not me. That's the questioner. He's an unoriginal, smug, skeptic, leftist philosopher king. I don't see why people think he's something special. Because on some things he's really, really good, and he's very, very thoughtful. I don't know. I once heard a thing of his on guns, a show he did on guns, on the Second Amendment and on guns. I thought it was one of the best discussions of guns and self-defense in America that I've ever heard. It was thoughtful. It was laid out. It was rational. It was, and I think you'd agree, most objectivists would agree with much of what he said, right? He's not anti-guns, but he's not, everybody should have a tank either. But he on certain issues is unbelievably rational. On Islam, he was very good. On religion, he's very good. Even on some cultural issues, he's very good on free speech. And even his presentation on, I think his presentation on free will is completely self-contradictory with all of his other stuff. I think he contradicts himself constantly. But on a lot of the issues, as long as he doesn't talk about consciousness, he's good. Right? As soon as he gets to consciousness and his experiences taking LSD or whatever it is you took, and his ideas about free will, that's out. The rest of the stuff is always interesting. Even his leftist stuff on economics is at least interesting in comparison to a run-of-the-mill leftist. What should NATO reaction to Belarus plane hijack be? I covered this 2 nights ago. Somebody asked me this question. I mean, I think in particular the UK, this is in a sense an act of war. At the very least, it should mean some kind of embargo. It should mean a retraction of all diplomatic relationships from Belarus. Short of hot war, it should mean cessation of all relationships with this country. I mean, it is the equivalent of an act of war. All right, could you move your debate with Richard Wolff to Tuesday on Ayn Rand's UK channel? I can't wait for that one. I have a feeling you're going to trigger him early. No, because it's at the University of Pennsylvania. It's a much better audience than Ayn Rand UK's channel gets, because it'll be all students, and many of them will be virgins in the sense that they've never heard ideas like mine. That's the kind of virgins I value, is ideological virgins. And they're paying me a lot of money to do it. And Ayn Rand UK pays me pittance to do it. So I'm going to UPenn. There's no way I'm switching that over. But for those of you who don't know, I do a weekly debate. Every week I do a debate on Tuesday at 2 p.m. East Coast time. What is that? 7 p.m. UK time, with a different European intellectual. And I've done one with a Marxist. I just did one with Zuby, who is a nice guy and a rapper, very conservative, religious. We did it on tradition. Next week, I'm debating religion, I guess religion versus atheism, something like that, with a woman I don't really know. But the idea is this is primarily targeted at Europe. but anybody's invited, and it's on Iron Man UK's channel, and we'll be doing this every week for the foreseeable future, or at least until I start traveling. Who is your favorite bodybuilder? Do you think Arnold Schwarzenegger looked ridiculous in his heyday? What did Ayn Rand think of pumping iron? I have no idea what Ayn Rand thought about pumping iron. I doubt she thought about pumping iron. I do not have a favorite bodybuilder. I don't particularly like bodybuilding. I find it an exaggeration of the material side. I find it unattractive, both in male and in female and in men. I think having muscle definition is attractive. I think having muscle definition is beautiful, but having that exaggerated, is I find it ugly. I just don't find it. I just don't find it beautiful. It's disproportionate. It's out of whack. I remember Leonard on several occasions, Leonard Peikoff on several occasions, vetoing like a book cover for Atlas Shrugged because the Atlas on the cover was too buff, was too exaggerated, the muscle. And he felt that was placing too much emphasis on the material and looking unnatural. Would you regard less than $100 million no longer FU money? No. I have a number for my FU money. You know what FU money is? I won't say it, but it's basically the amount of money where you can tell everybody to go FU and you don't need anybody. My number is 1/10 of that. So my FU number is 10 million. If I had 10 million in the bank today or an investment today, I wouldn't give, that would be it. I wouldn't care. I wouldn't worry. I wouldn't worry about money. I wouldn't think about money. I'd live my life. I have expensive tastes, but it's like my expensive taste is I don't know, a $600 meal. It's not a $100 million private jet. I don't need a $100 million private jet. So my tastes require a $10 million wealth budget, not a $100 million wealth budget. So, when I have $10 million soon, I hope, it's not that I would stop working, and it's not that I would stop charging a fee for what I do, but it's that I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't give it one thought in a sense of, do I have enough money to do what I want to do? Because I know what I want to do. I know the scope of what I want to do, and it fits into that budget. And pretty much I live that life today. There's very little that I want to do that I don't do, or that I want to buy that I don't buy today because of money. But I think about it. I want to get to the point where I don't have to think about it. And that's the FU money. And there were some years where not having FU money was stressful. How much effort will Ocon put into checking posts of other attendees to make sure they haven't said anything too negative about the current management? I don't know. I don't think we put on any effort to do that. But if you put out a lengthy blog, send out emails to AOI donors and market the posts and try to get as much attention to it as possible, not just being too negative, but being, saying outrageous things about, accusing current management of immorality, accusing current management of not just incompetence, but being immoral, accusing, then yeah, you're likely to be banned from Ocon. If you do that and you make a big effort to market it and you make a big effort to let the world know about it, then yeah, you're not likely to be invited back to Ocon. So sorry, I don't sanction my enemies. And I didn't make these people my enemies. They made themselves my enemies by coming after me. I was quite happy saying, you go your way. And the public statement was, wish you well, go do your own thing. I do my thing. And I never made a public statement about any problems I had with you. And that was it. The people who made it public were the other side. They came out with the exaggerated, ludicrous, false, and accusations of immorality. You know, what are you supposed to say? You don't sanction it. You just don't sanction it. So I'm ignoring it in the sense that I'm not going to go line by line and critique it, partially because it's a waste of your time. It's a waste of my time. And there's not enough I could say to give you objectivity. I don't want you to take the perspective of, oh yeah, well, Yaron says this is what happens. I believe Yaron. No, I mean, I don't want you. I want you to read the statements as they are and see if they're compelling and see if they're convincing. I think they're so self-contradictory that they shouldn't be, but I'll leave that to you. And you know, there's nothing I can give you. You know, I'd have to give you all my. I'd have to do like we'd have to have a court case where I give you all my emails. We do full discovery, and you can figure out who's right or who's wrong. I have no doubt which way that would go if to an objective audience. But I'm not interested in that. It seems like a waste of everybody's time, and I don't think you should be interested in that. There's nothing interesting going on here. The two parties who have massive disagreements and have disagreements about their view of each other. They have disagreements about strategy, and they have disagreements about how to deal with conflicts. And they have disagreements about the evaluations of certain intellectuals. That's it. And I don't think much more than that needs to be said. And I'm not going to try to refute everything that is being said about me or about Onkar and about other people at AOI. I think it's so some of it certainly is so ludicrous and so absurd that I shouldn't have to waste my time at it. And if I do, then I'd rather retire than waste my time doing it. If that's where the public is, that it's demanding a response to every one of these emails, then I'll just retire to the beach. I'll take my FU money and go and do something else with it. So I'm not engaging in it. So I know some of you like to pick at wounds and like to pick at these things and get another angle and throw oil in the fire and make it worse and so on. I'm not interested. You know, my commitment is to objectivism. My commitment is to Ayn Rand. It's to her legacy, into making sure that legacy is treated right and is preserved right. My commitment is to the work that Leonard Peikoff has done, and to the ideas of Leonard and Ein's, and that's what I'm committed to. And to hell with the rest of it. To hell with the personalities and the power plays and the accusations flying left and right. And plus, I've made judgments. People might disagree with them, but somebody has to make judgments. We all should. And when you're CEO, you make judgments about things. You might be wrong, but you have to make them. I don't know that I made quite a few mistakes, but relating to this conflict, I don't know that I made the wrong judgments, but if I did, I did. All right. Now I'm starting to do what I said I wouldn't do. So I don't want to talk about it. All right. Thank you, everybody. We've gone 2 hours and 15 minutes. Thank you for all of you for supporting the show. Thank you to the panelists who are obviously regular supporters of the show. Thank you to all the super chatters. We didn't quite make $400, but I think we got close. So Alejandrina, you did fine, and I'm sure you'll get a good night's sleep. Don't worry about it. We'll have other opportunities. As I said, this is the last show in this room. It's a goodbye room. I will be moving to my FU condo. And when it's all done, where all the construction is done, well, the renovation is done, I will share some of what the condo looks like and why it is an FU condo. And I'm moving there. It'll be very sparse because the construction is still going on, and we're going to live in 2 little rooms. And we're going to and my office is not set up, and it doesn't have any of the stuff except it'll have the desk with the computer and the camera. But over time, it'll keep getting better and keep getting more beautiful. And I might even do a show from the balcony, as somebody has suggested, so that you guys, you won't be able to smell the ocean, but at least you'll be able to see it. Or you might even be able to hear the waves crashing against. All right, everybody. Have a great week. Oh, long weekend. Have a great long weekend. I'll probably see you Saturday and Sunday. Definitely Sunday, probably Saturday from the new location. Thank you, everybody, for sticking around. Thank you for the support. Bye, everybody.